How are you, first of all?
I'm fine, actually. You know, I'm sort of I'm bored like everybody else, but we live on a farm, so we've been very, very lucky. We've been stuck here for a year, and stuck with your own children is deeply unpleasant, obviously. You know, clearly.
It is the last day, actually, for us, hopefully, fingers crossed, unless that new variant that they've apparently found, like, metamorphosizes into some horror story over the weekend, and all of a sudden they pull the plug on schools.
But can you imagine? Can you imagine a new variant now sending us back into lockdown?
Well, this is kind of the interesting thing on that variant. You know, obviously none of us are scientists, but they said that it's quite similar to the South African and Brazilian one. So if they're so concerned about this new one not working, what does that mean for those variants, and where does that lead us? I just hope they get those boosters out sooner rather than later.
I also noticed on the news last night that the number fell from 500,000 to 250,000 vaccinations yesterday, which for a process in full stride,
I think
suggests either a shortage of vaccines or some sort of issue. But
I wonder if that's like total vaccinations or just like new first doses, because I think they're now inviting people to because I think they're now inviting people back for the second doses as well.
Have you had yours, Nick?
I'm fucking way too young. What are you talking about? Like the under 30s are like, they're not.
Me and Nick are at the back of the queue.
Yeah, under 30. Yes, I forgot. Yeah, I'm a bit ahead of you, being 50.
I can't believe you'd even be rude enough to ask, Chris. That's unbelievable.
Well, no, I only say that because our colleague Paolo, he trotted off today somewhere near Mill Hill, and he's 51. So by the law of averages, I'm thinking I could be next at 50, and then obviously. When you go below 50, it's a lottery, isn't it? Apparently, it's that it doesn't matter how old you are. So I suppose you've written quite a lot about this in Fat Gladiator, or have you?
I've read
Nick. That leads me into the question. The year ahead. What are you looking forward to?
Well, I mean, lockdown has been sort of a strangely sort of good experience for the business, in terms of. And born out of tragedy. My mum passed away at the beginning of lockdown, not of COVID, but we had a Zoomerall with 400 people on it, and it was actually really nice. Everyone had a candle and a glass of wine. It actually felt like coming together. It felt much more comforting than I thought it would. And so I just sort of thought to myself, that and a few friends that were WhatsApping me and getting friends involved on WhatsApp. I thought, I never want to go back to being a stockbroker full time, but one call a month to 400 people, where I could share a little bit of collective wisdom from 30 years of having made appalling mistakes in the stock market. That was doable. So the idea was sort of born in COVID, and then the videos that we do. I don't know, you've seen the videos, Chris, or not?
So this is Fat Gladiator that you're talking about for the audience.
Yeah, stockbroking is storytelling, and then it coincided with a friend calling me and saying, this award-winning video production company called Chrome, they're all locked down, they can't film anywhere. Why don't you try making a story about why you think, uranium is a great investment, or why you think Pinterest is super interesting as a visual search engine because there's no hate content, and because actually the high street might be dying, but there's 1.2 million people selling stuff from home now. Retail isn't that tool, it's just moved to a different place, and they're a beneficiary. So as horrible as the personal tragedy has been, there's been a huge learning experience for me in the business, and it crafted something new and digital and more interesting than I think I ever could have thought of if I, had been left to my own devices.
Okay. Well, I suppose we could take a step back before Fat Gladiator, because clearly I first heard about you and all your magic when you had a business called Execution, and I'm just keen to understand, and I suppose the audience will be keen to understand that, you are an entrepreneur. You make mirth about different things, and I love you for that. But you've created some fantastic businesses over the years, and I'm just curious if you can roll the clock back and tell us more about, you know, the motivations to set up. I think it was your first business, Execution, and you know, kind of what led to that, and what was the sort of this is your life, Nick?
You know, I think what led to it is, you know, the TV series Men Behaving Badly. You know, what I noticed
I
was
do.
that
Probably Anthony doesn't.
I've definitely, it's two guys in tweed, right, going around usually in the pub somewhere. Have I got that right?
I'm not sure they're in tweed.
I think that's with Nail and I, isn't it? That's with Nail and I.
I gotta Google this.
I'm not sure they're in tweed, but there's definitely two guys.
No, I've got it totally wrong.
Yeah,
but
pray tell, Men Behaving Badly.
Well, you know, when you economically incentivize people to behave poorly, they never let you down. They have enough trouble not behaving poorly without economic incentivization. But inside of the investment banks, you know, the original rationale of an integrated investment bank was to serve the customers, you know, for buyer to find seller. But what happened is that so much technology got put in the dealing room that I found that my customers were being hurt by my own firm at the time. And that like a lot of technologies, like we see with Facebook today, the technology that started with great intentions became misused. And so in our world, we used to call that front running, where, you know, the derivatives desk were buying shares ahead of your cash customer. And also, you know, our job was to turn people over, or, you know, to create as much turnover as possible. That was supposedly what was the judge of a good salesman. And I was too young and immature at the time to realize that actually wasn't the thing that was in my customer's best interest. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, Execution was really formed from the idea of, it was really eBay. It was, let's cross large blocks of shares for customers in a environment where all the partners were hermetically sealed to keep their mouth shut rather than keep them open. Mm-hmm. And of course, you know, if you had $100 million order and you had 1% slippage on that order, that was $1 million, which was more than they were paying us in commission. Mm-hmm. So I spoke to a few very large customers and I said, if I go do this, will you back me? And you know, half a dozen big institutions said yes. It was the first time it had been done this side of the pond. And, you know, we grew from nothing to $100 million revenue business reasonably quickly.
And when you say reasonably quickly, that was what, 3, 4, 5 years?
Yeah, probably 4 or 5 years. Yeah. I mean, but it was cash flow positive from the first day.
Wow.
It was only when I employed people that it started to go wrong.
and I suppose how many people did you end up employing, Nick?
I don't know. I think we were probably 140, 150 in London, New York, between London, New York, and Hong Kong.
You enjoy managing that amount of people? Any learnings?
Some massive lessons. You know, like where, you know, I'd never managed. I mean, listen, when you start a business, you know, and you're me, people say, you know, you can't run a bath, and then when the business is working, they say, well, it's not worth anything because he's 50% of revenues. And then when you want to diversify, they say he's lost interest. so like, one of the things you need to learn about running a business is it's important to listen to other people, but it's also quite important not to listen to other people. Yeah. Otherwise, you never step out of your own front door to try anything ever. So that was one lesson. And I think the hardest lesson, you know, the thing that I was worst at, and I was bad at a lot of things, is firing people. You know, I used to know their mortgage situation, their private situation, if they were struggling at home because we worked long hours, and I used to wear it all. And then when someone wasn't good enough, rather than let them go, I would try and find a space for them. And I suppose the lesson of that is that I actually extended the period of time over which they were allowed to delude themselves. I thought I was doing them a favor by trying to extend the vacation, but actually, it didn't really serve other people's interests particularly well either. So I think I became a little bit more straightforward, which you can only have the power to do if you believe it's actually in the person's interest that you're letting go. And that was a tough lesson for me.
Yeah, and I suppose what years are we talking here, Nick, that you were running Execution? Just remind me.
I think it was 2000 to 2012.
Yeah, and so that was kind of the heyday of the big ups and the big down in the world of finance, I believe. But you were one of the winners in the whole financial meltdown, I believe, from memory's sake.
Yeah, no. One day I will write a book about selling a broking firm for cash in the sovereign debt crisis, but not quite enough time has elapsed yet for that publication.
You sold the business for, was it in 2008 or from memory, or?
Well, it was a 3-year process. We sold half, and then I had to do another 2 or 3 years, and there were huge problems with the regulatory problems that weren't of our making. And fun enough, wasn't the investment bank of the acquirers making either. It was the retail bank that had problems. So, I used to describe it, that 3-year period, as sort of trying to rearrange your garden furniture during a hurricane. You couldn't really come out. People were looking for you for leadership, but when things were in the hands of the regulator, you were no longer in control. So as an entrepreneur, you don't mind failing as long as it's your failure. As long as you're correlated to your upside and your downside, you're okay. But when you become correlated to other people's problems that aren't of your making, and you can't offer the leadership to your people that you want to offer, that was the most difficult 3 years of my life. Yeah. I was addicted to sleeping pills. I was drinking too much. I just couldn't. I couldn't rationalize not being able to lead my people out of it. I used to go to work every day. I was, and they shut down the US business, and I had to fire a bunch of people and lose 20 million of revenues because the US regulator said the acquirer can't acquire in the US. So I was in tears. I was literally in tears.
If it happened to you a second time around, do you think you would handle it better, or is it just it's a really painful process that is very difficult for anybody to handle?
No, I think it's difficult for anyone to handle. I think I think people leave their jobs when they lose the correlation between how good they are at their job and how good the organisation is at its job. So you get to a certain level in an investment bank where it starts to become politics and starts to become revenue, or they call you in and say you had a great year, but unfortunately the Chinese derivatives department lost £400 million, so therefore you're down 30%. I think entrepreneurs struggle with that particularly, but I think everyone struggles with not seeing a clear correlation between how well or how badly they do something and how they get compensated, either materially or
materially,
immaterially, in terms of there are many other great ways of giving other than receiving financial rewards. For example, at Execution, we established the first global ceasefire day through the United Nations, and we had a charity called Peace One Day work with us, founded by a guy called Jeremy Gilly, who's a great mate to this day. We were both in New York when the plane hit the World Trade Center, and they worked with us for 10 years at no charge, right next to the brokers in the dealing room. And then we had charity trading days where we gave 10 million to charity over the course of Execution's lives. So this sort of seems like a doing well by doing good. It's a relatively new concept, to us. It was always clear to me that Execution needed to have a soul and a heartbeat and a reason to go to work other than just lining one's own pockets and taking care of one's family. Did
you find that doing those charitable good works as well helped to reinforce the kind of culture that you wanted at the organization as well?
Undoubtedly. It was it's weird. I haven't talked about it very often to many people, but it's undoubtedly one of the things that I and probably some of my partners feel most proud about, is that we were helping well before it became trendy to help.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah, on that kind of note, Nick, there's been some the world is obviously quite obsessed now with especially during the pandemic, on the whole the founder journey. You should never find or build a business when you're just doing it on your own. You should always do it with someone else. The strain that can have on founders in terms of mental health. I mean, just curious, like with execution, being the first business that you set up, you pretty much did that yourself, I believe. And just was you mentioned about the sort of sleeping pills and things like that. I mean, was it a mental, like, mind, I suppose, fuck, basically? Was it really hard?
Well, the hardest years were after we sold, right? Oh. When you didn't have that control and correlation, which we talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. There were difficult bits in different parts of the journey. Persuading Pershing to allow us to settle $100 million trades with $1 million of cash in our balance sheet was quite difficult at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And then the first 4 or 5 years were just joyous because we were just like kids in a candy store. Mm-hmm. And then fatigue sets in, and people start. We were so right about sort of front running that tens of billions of dollars were deployed to create dark pools and light pools of liquidity where customers couldn't see other customers trading. But we were so busy patting ourselves on the back about how well we were doing that we sort of stopped looking 3 or 4 years forward for the next thing. And so after year 5 or 6, that was a difficult period for a difficult reason. It's like you're over 100 people, you've got a proper HR department, it all feels very more grown up. I mean, let's not forget, we were on space hoppers with a mini golf course in a warehouse in Brick Lane with a video wall, and all a new employee had to do was come down dressed as Elvis and sing karaoke. We went from that to an HR department. So it definitely took my eye off the ball.
One of the things that I think is quite interesting about that entrepreneur journey is post-exit, right? This thing that you spent, in your case, like almost 12 years building, devoting yourself to, getting gray hairs from, suddenly is gone and out of your life. How do you deal with that? And what was it like trying to find the inspiration for startup number 2?
How do you avoid grey hairs? Well, this is a good lockdown story, actually, because I've actually dyed my hair, and what happened during lockdown is my wife said she wanted me to dye, and I assumed that she was talking about my hair, but actually she just wanted me to dye. So I got that completely wrong and went and dyed my hair black. So that was a bit of a problem. But like, the bottom line is, any problem is conquerable if you love what you do. And you love the people around you. So I founded Execution, but so we're really clear, it was the dirty dozen. I couldn't have done it without a team of extraordinarily nice and talented people around me. And we had our ups and our downs, and we pulled our hair out, and we had our falling outs. But if we have a reunion now, I think to a man and to a woman, they would say that they were the best. First 5 years, 6 years was the best time of their professional career, and that makes it worth it. You got to move forward, and we all have now.
What was that in-between period like, between finishing an Execution and then the next startup?
I was completely lost, really. I think, look, the skills you need to found a business and the vision you need to see it are just a diametrically opposite set of skills to the skills that you need to run one. And a great founder has to understand what he's good at and what he's bad at, and have the confidence to make himself redundant. So I had a vision for Curation, which was the next business that I started, where we basically, I knew there was a big problem with information overload, and I knew that every important email was dying in the ether, and I knew that every important Bloomberg signal was locked down in a customer terminal. So I was like, let's build a search engine on your key revenues, key revenue opportunities, your key risks, so that you've got a curated version of everything you need, And we turn that into a peripheral risk monitoring service, and the technology does some really clever stuff. And it became very ESG centric because our big customers became interested in ESG. And so part of it was my vision and part of it was the customers leading us there. But despite telling people to be careful about a pandemic in 2016 and 2019, highlighting Bill Gates and what he was saying, despite talking about antibiotic resistance, despite talking about disruption, people don't pay to fix a problem till their house is on fire. It was a very difficult sell, but what it started to do was throw off these incredible signals to do with the stock market. So when an oil super major says, could you start following hydrogen 5 years ago, the market side of me kicked in and noticed that hydrogen stocks started to go up, and now they're up 2,000% over 5 years. When you're in the fossil fuel business, it's difficult to get out, but you can stop flying your people around in airplanes burning 100 million tons of carbon. So buying Zoom at 20 and selling airlines, we were getting, if anything, calls that were so early on what was about to happen. They were all pre-pandemic. That sort of, Curation now has this amazing data set of 250,000 signals to do with the environment, and now we've moved on to that to help, if you like, germinate another business. And Curation's got a life of its own in the environment, but that wasn't all my planning or thinking. It's just kind of how it's evolved. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's fascinating. And then from my understanding, being a Curation, I suppose, customer or follower, I've recently come across Sust, and naturally also you talked about it earlier, the Fat Gladiator. Just if you can piece together what's going on there, Nick, because they're two. Is it like Curation has given birth to two twins, maybe? Or,
yeah.
No,
that's right. So it's using the same data set for two different outcomes. Sust is, I think, trying to position itself as the Wired of the environment, with a bit more of a focus on solutions. So to me, my interpretation of Sust, and maybe Sandy can give you a better explanation, but my view of Sust is that, thanks for waking us up, Greta, but now what do you want us to do? Should it be nuclear? Should it, and I know you're only a young lady and a very brilliant one, but what are we supposed to do about it? So I'm much more into listening to Gates than I am to Greta, because Gates has a range of solutions and a range of investments that can solve the problem that we're facing. And the great lesson from Curation is that Gates started building a traveling wave reactor, which basically fires off depleted uranium, which is waste uranium from nuclear power plants.
I saw that on Inside Bill's Brain. I think it was the 3rd episode. Right, it's amazing. Yeah.
Right. And so, and that he was going to build it in China, and then Trump fell out with the Chinese. But he started that 10 years ago. And so that article from 10 years ago is more interesting today than it was when it was written 10 years ago, because it takes 10 years to build one.
Yeah.
And so, keeping these signals in place and organizing them in a chronological order, and a relentless focus on solution-based outcomes rather than problem-based outcomes, which I think, Curation struggled economically as a business because it was problems. I think what Sandy and the team are trying to do is keep that environmental focus and data set, but focus on the solutions for businesses, for the world, for countries, for governments. And I know that they'll do a much better job than I did. That
I would say that. And I suppose we've just had our beloved budget. Anything in there that struck you as being ESG friendly, or anything that really stood out that you think is going to help us as we grow out of the pandemic times, or or still remain in pandemic times? But anything catch your eye this week, Nick?
Really, I mean, my big takeaway was that they can't kick you when you're down. You know, these economies need to get to escape velocity before they start to really pay back in any way, shape, or form. And you know, there are whole new areas of economics opening up, to which I think the government needs to sort of challenge itself, which is growth. You know, can you have prosperity without growth? Because if America grows at 2% every year for the next, by 2050, the economy's doubled in size, and we have systemic risk in the world. And then a book that I've been meaning to read forever, called The Deficit Myth, which is, you know, we've always been talking about paying back the deficit since I can remember, in the 1970s with Labour governments and the winter of discontent, and we've got to pay back the deficit. We never seem to have done that, and not too much harm seems to have happened at this point, you know. So I think, you know, the areas of economics which fascinate me are prosperity without growth, and whether the deficit, you know, like I was saying, even on Question Time last night, you know, if interest rates are effectively zero and issued by the Bank of England, and everybody else is doing the same thing relatively around you, is there this pressing need to pay back that money? I'm not smart enough, but as a trend spotter, those are the monstrous questions coming out of the budget. For me, any sort of individual policy in isolation is less interesting. We always going to need the time to see whether the action it actually is implemented, and whether there's a causal effect, and you achieve what you're aiming to achieve through policy.
Ray Dalio has some excellent content about how we're in the end of the long-term debt cycle and what happens with painful deleveraging, which you kind of saw, you know, in the sovereign bond crisis in like the 80s in South America and this sort of thing. It's fascinating stuff. And then I read some article, it's kind of more like a manifesto. It was saying that, if anything, all the QA plus the fiscal stimulus this time has just sort of pushed that timeline out of when that was going to happen.
Yeah, but we've sort of been pushing that timeline out for 50 years, right? You know, my mum had a ration book mentality where, you know, you didn't waste stuff, and you know, all I know is that I look at Japan, whose market only just got back up to the level it was at when I started in the stock market 30 years ago. Yeah, it's still a pretty civilized country. It's still got an amazing quality of life. You know, I say pretty civilized, extremely civilized, you know. It's still got a pretty amazing way of life, high quality of infrastructure, roads, cities, you know, and so I'm starting to ask more and more questions of my historic economic philosophy, you know.
Yeah.
I'm starting to ask that myself.
It's fascinating. And, you know, different elements of that, like who owns your debt, right? Because I think that's one of the things they always point out with Japan is a lot of the debt is owned by the people of Japan rather than by, you know, somebody else.
Right, and us never paying ourselves back is more doable, I suspect, than us not paying somebody else who's not us back. If that makes any sense.
I got you.
I want to sort of talk a bit more, Nick, about the whole ESG piece in general, because I remember when I was way back in 20 years ago at Morgan Stanley or somewhere like that, and it was oh yeah, this year we're going to focus on all these ESG funds, and you know, and you know, you need to check if any you know, whether you know, if you're covering tobacco, what the problem is with covering tobacco, and all you know, because we're going to lose half of our investment base in tobacco stocks. And it was just very on vogue, and very much there were like ups and downs of where we were told to focus on ESG and to really, you know, advise people clearly about ESG. And I know Curation has done great things, and I know that you talk to a large amount, or were talking to, or are talking to a large amount of big corporations at a very senior level, and pandemic has accelerated that, I imagine. Is there really, when you look at big corporate, do they get it? Are they really getting it? Are you seeing that there's a light going on truly?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure that would have been the case 3 or 4 years ago. I think, by and large, the way that capitalism is set up is that you get it when it starts to hit you in the pocket. If you look at the share prices of oil super majors, fossil fuel companies or coal companies, there's no doubt that they're getting hit in the pocket. Now, whether it's right to hit them in the pocket if they're genuinely trying to transition, like BP, I have huge sympathy for, not just because they've been an amazing and loyal sort of customer, but because you can see that they're 1,000,000% genuine in the transition. Yeah. And people are going to sell their shares, go home, turn their lights on, charge their phones and heat them. Now BP has been a great example to me, because you just couldn't find a more genuine organization. And so to me, there's a couple of things about ESG, which is that the first thing my mum taught me as a 2-year-old was like, Nick, don't leave food on your plate. There are people that are going hungry in the world. I believe that the second thing she taught me is don't waste stuff, right? Not just food, but waste is just the bad thing. 15 toys as a parent, you give your kids all these toys at Christmas and you see 10 discarded, it's wrong, right? And I know that most people would rather have a low electricity bill than a high electricity bill. And I know that most people would rather be sustainable. So to me, ESG was common sense, and it was capitalism and free markets running out of control. So there is a financial component to it, but there's a common sense component to it, which is, I don't care if there's global warming or not. Morally, this is not the right way to behave, even if we conquered climate change. Now, climate change is putting an existential risk in front of us, which suggests that everybody should take it very seriously if they care about the generations to come, whether it be their children or their families. So yes, they're taking it seriously, and yes, it had to take an existential threat to get people to take it seriously, but that existential threat was highlighted by Al Gore 20 years ago. So we know that when the financial pain kicked in, that's when people started to take it seriously. So yeah, I think it's really sincere. I think the taxonomy behind the ESG movement is fundamentally flawed in terms of we've just got to grips with carbon, but we haven't even started to get to grips with water, which is the cheapest commodity in the world and the one we're running out of fast, and not just where you think in Africa. So if you take 200, Gates again says this in Netflix, and there's a great Netflix documentary in Explain. But 200 litres of water to make this t-shirt, no tax on it, 100 litres to make a pint. I mean, my numbers are probably incorrect. So yeah, I think that there's complete sincerity now.
Yeah, and also to your point there, water used to make meat obviously has a huge environmental impact. So it's interesting to see Japan talking about lab-grown meat, right, and be able to make chunks of it. To happen in the last couple of weeks.
And synthesized cannabis as well. Since it's synthesized, it's grown in a lab. Is it CBD? So cellular goods just floated last week. So there's no plant grown at all. It's just
the cannabinoids.
And in prawns as well. Beyond prawn, beyond seafoods coming. So food innovation is a extraordinarily interesting area, and of course, what goes in the Diet Coke versus the Coke. Yeah. Also, there's no silver bullet in ESG. You learn that pretty damn quick.
Yeah. So turning to your I suppose trading sort of stockbroking head, the Fat Gladiator. Would I be wrong to assume that this could become quite like Reddit in a sense, and within that, I'm curious to find out your views on sort of like the socialization of trading commentary. Clearly we saw all the stuff with GameStop, and I'm just curious, do you think that that could become a trend? Is Fat Gladiator on that wave? Just curious about your thoughts there, Nick.
So let's be clear. ever since stock markets started, when someone bought a stock, the next thing they did is tell their mate why, right? Long before social media, right? So stock goes up, stocks go up because someone buys it after you've bought it. Yeah. So the idea that like Reddit were doing something enormously different, right, to anything any hedge fund manager has ever done in its career, right, is kind of a bit strange to me. It's kind of, they just did it at scale, right?
And they managed to pick one hell of a moment to do it as well.
Very well. It was coming, right? It was coming because there are secular trends and there are cyclical ones. So markets going up and down is cyclical. The democratization of information through the internet, the socialization of trading through being able to communicate quickly and efficiently with millions of people, and the weaponization of apps all collided, right? And you know, I've been writing about it for years, about what I call mirror trading, which other people in social media call follow. You know, why do you need to hold 100 billion of someone's assets if they can just follow your trade, right? You know, you don't need to hold it, you know, and I think it would disrupt the whole of the asset management industry. I think it's much bigger than anybody realizes. You know, why do you want the regulated obligation of holding someone's funds when you can follow, or an expert could follow, and you could have access to your funds whenever you like? I mean, that's kind of where the ETF market is. They're sort of, they're almost asset managers in an individual shell, and you have daily liquidity. So you know, the Reddit crew, I think are super interesting. 76% of retail customers lose money according to IG Index, and they're probably a little bit more skilled than the Reddit crew. The stupidity of that to this point, and maybe I've got it wrong, is buying a stock that was not fundamentally sound. Start doing it with stocks that are interesting. So our last Fat Gladiator debate was Manchester United, Dortmund, and Juventus, all publicly traded football club. You know, where the fans are more interested in loyalty and their cradle to grave than they are in economic return. What a brilliant part, and they're all cheap anyway. I think 100% cheap as global brands, and the big getting bigger, and as they start to capture their digital audience through very different channels like crypto. You know, what would happen to Man United if it was trading at 10 billion rather than 2 billion? It's kind of more interesting. So I think that when we're going to start to see some social trades that make sense, right? Carbon could be a social trade where you buy carbon, you push the price up, you punish emitters, you do good for society. That could, you know, football clubs could be a social trade. So I'm not trying to be clever. I've seen it coming for years. I'm not an angry old man saying, how dare you guys do that? Because everyone's been doing it since the creation of time. You just found a better way to do it. And I just marvel at the ingenuity of the kids. And we say this in one of our Fat Gladiator videos, is that, you know, they didn't have cars with private drivers, so they invented Uber. They didn't have holiday homes, so they invented Airbnb. And they didn't have money, so they invented money, right?
Yeah, so they use options contracts.
Right. Don't be surprised if they invent a way for stocks to go up as well. Now, right now, I think their technique's a bit flawed. And one of the missions that I'll be on for the rest of my life is trying to help that crew do well and make good decisions, not bad ones.
That's good. So would you say that there's expansion plans for Fat Gladiator to become even more gladiatorial?
Yeah, we have Fat Gladiator. You know why Fat Gladiator is called Fat Gladiator, don't you, Chris? Right?
I don't.
Pray tell.
Well, what happens if your job is being a gladiator and you put on a lot of weight? What happens to you? Huh?
Slaughtered.
You're a fat gladiator. It's like short life expectancy. Huh? Yeah. So Fat Gladiators, it's not a comment on the world's global obesity epidemic caused by sugar. It's really sort of saying, don't be a fat gladiator, right? It's bad, and that's bad if you're a company. So how does the auto industry become disrupted by a battery that was patented in 1960 or whatever it was? Because they're fat gladiators, right? You know, the same story as execution. Need patting myself on the back as the machines took over. So that's where the name comes from. And, you know, it's about 100 people and 250 billion, I think, of assets represented by the various bits of you know, the organizations or the family offices or the network that people represent. So it's an astonishing group of individuals. It's interested in creating economic and social value. So we want to have a culture of putting back. And one of the ways that we can put back is by what I call currently Fit Gladiators, which is retail, where we produce these videos for retail, and we haven't decided how we're going to help. And what it's a twinkle in my eye right now, but it's coming, hopefully coming to a cinema near you, and it will, you know, let's give you know, no one is right the whole time, but we'll give kids the wealth of the Fat Gladiators experience in a retail format.
I like that. Financial fitness videos.
Well, yeah, it's Shareflix is what I call it. It looks like Netflix, and you know, but it's modern, and it's social media, and it's film based, and it's much more graphic, and it's much more, you know, like, you know, Bloomberg's like one of the most brilliant businesses ever created, but it's not very pretty, and it's you know, it's not very retail. Yeah.
Very good. Anyway. So that's so Fit Gladiator is the plan for the year ahead. I'm always curious to ask people, great people like you, Nick, what, you know, if you were to do it all again, what wouldn't you do?
Wow. You know, I wouldn't drink quite as much. but I honestly, you know, I'm sure that I've made millions of mistakes, but they've always been made with the best of intention. And I think that, you know, you're defined by the mistakes you make and how you react to them. So to sort of say that you regret making them or you would do something differently is pretty difficult. You know, I mean, I'm the least perfect human being you'll ever have on this interview, but I can't say I do anything particularly different. You know,
had a million mistakes and a million learning opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there are. Yeah, it's very difficult to sort of nail down anything that you do with genuine intention and integrity that's wrong. I could look back on my days at you know, a global investment bank and think that, you know, my behavior, you know, what I did to customers wasn't what I wanted, what I thought was the right thing to do, but I just didn't have the maturity to know what I was doing at the time, you know. And as soon as I did, I set up a business to fix the problem. So you know, there are lots of different things that I wish I'd done. Not go to the Monaco Grand Prix and get drunk and then listen to Cars with a Hangover would be quite high up on my list, I think. I actually left before the Grand Prix. I couldn't handle it.
Very good. I suppose one. Well, I think a little bird told me that you suddenly got into exercise in lockdown. I believe you've indulged in a Peloton. Is that correct?
You're talking about Leanne.
Peloton.
I think it's Leanne Helsby, who's the Peloton instructor. Yeah, I now go to my Peloton screen and it says your usual. It's fine goes. So yeah, I've been working out, but actually, if you read this week's blog, it's all about having surpassed the 200 pound mark for the first time in my life, and putting on 7 pounds during lockdown, and a whole huge number of range of people that I need to thank for that. In fact, well, you know, one of them, of course, being my wife, who looked after us incredibly well. Yeah. This is not going out before Sunday, is it?
No.
No, because like one of the things I write in the blog is I said, you know, like my wife's been incredible and kept me well fed, but actually she thought the Credit Crunch was a breakfast cereal in the financial crisis. so she was well placed to keep me stocked up. But no, I've been working out. But unless you eat well, working out doesn't really help, I don't think.
Yeah. And if you drink as well.
Yeah. Well, don't forget, my kids are 24, 22, 21.
Yeah.
Right? And 16 or 15.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get in trouble now. Yeah, it might actually be 14. Might be 15 in June.
Yeah. So you drink with them then?
Well, you try and keep up when appropriate, not necessarily during the week or whatever, but you might as well, one of the things I'll do when eventually they go back to whatever they're doing is I'll just pour away 5 beers and 4 bottles of wine each night to just remind myself of them.
Each individual bottle named after them.
Just so that I can feel the lockdown experience when they're gone.
Custom labels.
Yeah, exactly. Or just donate some money to a random charity to get rid of the money another way.
Nice touch. And then we've been a bit nosy on people's viewing habits during lockdown. Obviously, I think you talked about Inside Bill's Brain. Anything you want to recommend to our avid viewers and listeners as to something good to?
You're hitting my sweet spot, really. It's like everything I'm writing in the blog this weekend. You're asking me about. So I started the pandemic with the repair shop, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
It's upcycling and it's my great grandfather's toy clock, and they bursting into tears. But I think I had some repair shop fatigue after a while, and I finished the pandemic watching the Fishermen of Cornwall, based on the fact that when you see a 4 a.m. sardine trip, 4 Zoom calls doesn't seem so bad. They've helped me tremendously. Huh?
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. No, I quite like that Fisherman of Cornwall. Have you watched it, Anthony?
Love the Fisherman of Cornwall.
Oh, it's quite good.
Is it sort of like Deadliest Catch? Is it kind of like that?
No, it's much more earthy.
Yeah.
I mean, they work bloody hard, and they deal with a lot of politics as well. But also, you respect them, but I'm not sure it'd be for me. Would be the conclusion that I would come to. But I respect them immensely.
Yeah, no, you're right. And there's no like blockbusters on Netflix or anything like that you've kind of been gripped by.
We did a bit of that chess gambit thing. That was
the Queen's Gambit.
Queen's Gambit was quite good. I mean, The Mandalorian. This is the way.
This is the way. Yeah.
This is the way. My 15-year-old keeps me up with The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
So I put on one of the social media posts, like I was writing about Reddit or one of those things. I put, "This is the way."
This is the way. Yeah.
Really interesting. No one in our age group understands it. Really.
What about have you watched Lupin?
No, I haven't. Is that? Is that the male witch?
No, so Lupin, it's based in France and based on an old book series about this guy who's a bit of a con artist and a master thief, and then it's set in modern day. It's quite good.
Arsène Lupin. Yeah,
Arsène Lupin.
The Serpent was pretty good.
I haven't watched it. I've heard that it was very good.
It's quite heavy. It's not light, but it's true.
What was that, Nick? I didn't hear you then.
The Serpent.
Serpent. Yeah. Oh yeah, Mrs.
That's
Lowe.
on BBC.
Mrs. Lowe loved that one. She was gorging on that. My wife has this habit of like, oh yes, watch a show together and cuddle up, and then so we watch one, and then she gets really into it. I fall asleep. Wake up the following day or the following night. You go, oh, should we watch episode 2 now, darling? No, I'm on episode 7.
I'll tell you.
That interesting. Yeah.
You'd be Gogglebox prime time. You would be.
Snoozing on the couch.
Chris from
and here we have Chris and Cheryl.
In Nottingham, Chris is on the sofa.
Yes. Perhaps that could be a second
we decided a long time ago that we could never be Gogglebox candidates in this house for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah. So I think on that happy note, Nick, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking the time today. It's been fascinating, some amazing stories and anecdotes. Really enjoyed catching up, and I do want to ask one last question. The books behind you, is
Fake.
it
They're all fake.
or is it something you actually do read?
Have you read
Are
any of
you
it?
suggesting that you don't have a copy of Shakespeare's entire works in front of you at the moment?
Very good.
Well, that looks
This
like
is
quite
like-
a dog-eared copy as well.
Every sales trader, this is the Bible.
Yeah.
You know, I am quickly ill and well again. So Anthony loves. Oh, happy horse to bear the weight of Anthony. You know, it's good stuff. You need to read it.
Yeah. Well, look, I'd say my thank you. Anthony, anything from you for Nick?
No, just thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Been brilliant. Really
No, it's good fun.
Thanks again. Cheers. Take care. Have a wonderful weekend. And thank you.
And you.